Okay, cool. We're live on various services. Hopefully, we'll get some chatters coming in on there, and yeah, see what happens on Start Mata. But hmm, awesome, John, I'm glad you're here because this might be helpful since you're a photographer, filmmaker. Morvareed has some IP experience, so yeah, Morvareed, now that we have someone watching, let's get started. Please. All right, my audio is a little bit low apparently. Is that better? Can you hear me now, Twitch? All right, cool.
Hi.
All right, so yeah, Morvareed, thanks for being here. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Morvareed Salehpour, business and tech attorney and founder at Salehpour Legal. I focus on providing high-touch proactive counsel and strategy to small and mid-sized businesses and startups, focused on contracts, data privacy, intellectual property licensing and monetization, and mergers and acquisitions.
Awesome. John, since you're here, if you're curious, have any questions about legal aspects of, being a filmmaker, a photographer, if there's any projects you're working on that might be of, worth sharing more read, you can hear some insights that you may not be aware of in regards to like legal matters or licensing or anything like that. Feel free to raise your hand. I can bring you up on stage so you can ask questions using your microphone, camera optional, or you can use the chat. Either way, it's your choice. Let's see what you got. Morvareed, while we're waiting for John and some others to chime in, um, you've been doing a lot of work in the community in different areas as a mentor, of course, with us and others, and you've been organizing a lot of fun events, mostly focused on UCLA alumni. But I'd love to hear like an update of what you've been doing in the community and what you're working on.
Sure. So, yes, in terms of community events, I always have educational content that I put out on my social media. So that's always helpful for founders and business owners, just so that they can kind of be aware of what issues they need to be addressing in their businesses or paying attention to. So, that's also my YouTube. So that's available for founders who just want to get educated about some of the issues. And then I am on the board for UCLA alumni, so I coordinate hiking, networking events for alumni. I'm also part of a couple co-host for a couple other tech groups where we do kind of hikes. So those are they happen as well a little bit more sporadically. So if you're interested in being active and are in the tech space, feel free to reach out to me and I'll get you on the lists for the different groups that I'm part of running and coordinating to let people kind of in the community connect. And then personally, just been in business, been just helping clients kind of on lots of interesting matters. As always, I have a client right now in the process of selling their business, so that's always a exciting time, and I've been helping them navigate through that. So we'll hopefully the goal is to get that probably closed this in March. So that'll be exciting.
Awesome. That's actually a good kind of like topic to discuss since you're in the thick of it right now. What are some best practices and mistakes you see with business founders, business owners when it comes to looking to exit their company? Yeah, leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, a lot of times, I guess, people don't realize to really maximize valuation and the kind of the value they're going to get out for in terms of selling their business, they really should be looking at it from a long-term basis and putting in some effort to really clean things up and set up their companies for sale at least a couple years in advance. That's really ideal, right? Because if you are kind of being intentional about, okay, I want to make sure my financials look good, I want to make sure my agreements look good so that when someone comes in and does due diligence, things look good and you can really support a high valuation and multiple there. So I think to really set it up well, you should be putting in a couple years of effort to clean things up and set up the business for sale. Sometimes companies don't go down that route, so you just kind of have to deal with what the existing books and records are. And that sometimes creates complexities when you start to get into due diligence, right? And things come out where, maybe nobody knew about, right? Or you find some, like I had, I've had situations where, had a founder tell me like, oh, by the way, there's some deals we don't have records of that are on, that are going on. And so you kind of have to start to deal with these complexities of, okay, well, there's messy things. We got to clean it up. And sometimes that does affect valuation, right? Like if a buyer has to deal with some of this messy stuff, that can affect the price or just the complexity of the deal. So better to put in the effort early.
Yeah, I mean that's an important thing, and in regards to just yeah, putting in the effort early and kind of building a strong foundation. Even if you are a founder that doesn't expect to exit your company, sell your company at some point, it's still going to be beneficial to do that proper foundational work. And kind of like touching on that, like in your experience, how like what's the ratio between founders that go into starting a business venture with the intention to exit versus founders who never really intended on that being the plan, but get to a point where it's either, almost like a forced thing because the business is kind of like not growing the way they expected it to, or they just happen to catch attention of a larger, organization that sees them as a viable acquisition opportunity. I'm just curious, like, what the ratio is in your like experience, even though it's purely anecdotal.
Yeah. Well, I think that most businesses don't generally start with the intention of being acquired. I know some founders go in with that, and I think those businesses, it's actually a little bit more difficult to succeed because they're not actually approaching the business with the intent to create a growing, scaling, sustainable business. They're more focused on this goal of we want to sell, right? Versus I find the most naturally successful situations for exit are situations where someone may not have intended to sell, but the right opportunity came up, so it made sense. Or maybe they've been operating for a while and they want to, maybe move on to the next thing now, right? So that is a time. And yes, there are some situations where businesses will go down the route of seeking another round of funding, and they're not able quite to get that because of what the market is at the moment, so they're kind of forced to sell. So that sometimes does happen. But I think most often the successful founders I see go into a business with the intent to build a business versus the intent to sell a business.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that in regards to what I've seen with founders and the ones that are more successful, and a lot of that too is because it's coming from a place of typically more passion and a deeper understanding of what it is they're trying to accomplish because it's linked to more personal experiences in that market or industry, or being someone that uses another product or service that is frustrating for them and they want to channel that frustration into building something that's a better option for themselves first and then others. And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear that. And, going back to your initial kind of like, advice and insight in regards to how important it is to, even if that's not your intention, to still kind of like, be prepared for that. I'm curious just, how much easier and more valuable do you typically see like, companies that do put in that extra little like work to at least kind of be ready in case that is an option, or a forced path that need to take to sell the company versus last minute just being kind of caught up in things and going, oh crap, we really need to like figure out how to get rid of this company, or oh crap, we just got like this awesome like, interest from a big company.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, when you haven't put in that kind of forethought to just keep things like a fully operational like business that kind of the books are clean, the records are clean, I mean, you will end up having to do cleanup, and that cleanup will hurt the valuation of the company and the purchase price. It's going to affect it. Like I've had situations where clients, didn't escalate all their agreements to legal, and they had sales teams enter into agreements with unfavorable terms, right? And those unfavorable terms ended up affecting, that affects the liabilities that a buyer is taking on. And as a result, that affects the purchase price. And there's no way to kind of get out of that. So that they that in that situation, they had a couple, they experienced a financial whammy in a couple ways, right? It was like one, the valuation's going down, so that's affecting like purchase price and all that. But they also had to spend now legal costs and time and efforts in negotiating specific amendments and deal changes to those deals that were problematic, to allow them to kind of be in a position to even be acceptable to the buyer, right? So it was kind of like a double financial hit there that could have been avoided while putting in some more effort into how they handled their contracting, right? And how they educated their sales team.
Yeah, I was curious too, like on the timetable of that, just having to do a lot extra like, work in response to the due diligence or, on the investor side, purchaser side, and then, on their own internal side to get all this done. Like how often have you seen that, I guess, lead to a deal being canceled? Like, a buyer being like, "Oh, this is too much. We're just gonna find another alternative to kind of like, move forward with the strategy of acquiring someone or buying out a business."
Yeah, I haven't, thankfully, with my clients, I haven't seen that issue arise. Probably because they're better about seeking legal counsel. But I have heard, stories about things, situations like that where, people don't necessarily seek counsel and things, fall apart. And I've definitely, seen situations, for example, someone who was dealing with trying to sell their franchise, and they were not even aware of their own franchise agreement and what was allowed under that, right? And the restrictions that they had around trying to sell their franchise, right? So sometimes I think people just try to, complete something, and it's only as they get into the weeds they realize I might not actually be able to do this. So I did have that situation where I'd tell someone, I don't think you can actually go forward with this because your franchise agreement doesn't allow you to do this, right?
Yeah, that's that's a rough situation to kind of get surprised by. And it kind of also illustrates some of these just, common sense best practices that we try to push into the community is to really take your time to pay attention to all the details and don't be in a rush, because if you do that, you're going to skip something that could be incredibly critical like you just demonstrated. And like the easiest kind of example that I often give in these online communities is read the rules of the community that you're in. Like you're an entrepreneur, you're a business, founder, an operator. Why are you incapable of just reading like a simple like, set of rules before you start engaging in a company? Like it's just like a simple exercise to do to keep you aware of all these much larger situations that you're going to find yourself in as a business owner operator that carry real consequences, like you demonstrated. Like, oh, you didn't properly read your agreement, you can't do this, you just wasted all this time and, capital trying to make this deal happen that you can't do. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear like, a real good real life example of yeah, not taking the time to read the right things.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I find that, I understand some of these agreements can be complex and, you know, hard to maybe understand, but you definitely have to take the time to, read it, try to understand it, or you got to hire experts to help you. You can't just ignore it, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how much pushback I see in some of these communities too in regards to working with a lawyer and taking the time and capital to do that and properly establish the business entity and utilize the right contracts. And I see this a lot, with just startup founders in regards to like privacy policies and those types of like user agreements or terms of service agreements. But since John's here, and again, John's a visual creator and film photography, when I'm in like these photography communities, I often see a lot of pushback from other photographers about not using a contract with their clients. I'm curious, if you have any experience working with content creators, photographers, filmmakers, in regards to like contracts and contract disputes and licensing and any matters like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sometimes hard to avoid. It's hard to avoid like fully, any entertainment industry connections in the LA. So, definitely have done some work in that space or that, and I think uh, there are some parts of the industry I think that don't like clear written agreements, and that's really problematic because it creates a lot of disputes that are then costly to litigate in court. I'll use one example from my large law firm days when I still did some litigation. There was one of these entertainment companies, and it was like a creative company that had started and was creating like TV shows and everything, and they had created some valuable pieces of property, and they had basically a contractor that they were working with, and the contractor, they had a basically like a handshake deal with them, right? So didn't really write anything down. There was maybe like an email where they tried to like memorialize some aspects of it. And they worked together for God, like 12 years, and it was fine, right? Things were fine. Then the recession happened and things weren't fine all of a sudden, right? The contractor took the couple pieces of valuable intellectual property, stole those and left. And the business kind of decided, you know what? We're not going to pursue that. We don't think we think those business lines are probably ending anyways. We're going to work on some new projects. And they became, in a year and a half, they created some new projects that were very valuable. So all of a sudden they were making millions of dollars in revenue. And the contractor came out of the woodwork and decided to claim that they were a partner in everything. And they owned half of everything now moving forward. And so it basically escalated to litigation in court. He said, she said. It's all oral, right? Really difficult to now establish, what's true, what's not. It really comes down to who the jury is going to find believable, right? And a lot of the agreements related with even the valuable properties were not like proper agreements because again they were entertainment industry, so things would be greenlit and it'd be like an email, right? So even the value of what was at issue was kind of iffy, right? And after litigating for about a year and a half, they finally settled on the eve of trial, right? And it was for a large settlement, lots of legal cost and expert cost involved in this process, and they could have avoided all of this by spending a couple $1,000s at the beginning with a lawyer to put in an agreement, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's one of these things that a lot of people don't realize how costly it can be down the line. And yeah, again, it's a good example of that. And yeah, like it's like I'm curious too, like focusing on photographers, creators. Once you work with a lawyer to kind of like establish like a common engagement contract with a client, like that's an investment they can reuse with clients over and over again, right? As long as it's like essentially like the same type of work and the same terms that the clients are agreeing to. They don't need to continuously go to the lawyer and get new contract every single client, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what they are doing, but for my clients, particularly like in the software, SaaS, tech services, or other services space will, create like a template for them to use with
Mm,
their customers, right? And then that'll be the basically the starting point. Particular deals people may negotiate on alternatives or specific points, and if someone needs assistance with a request, I can help them. But you create a basic structure that you're going to use with all your customers, for
yeah.
example.
Yeah, and that's good information to share so people are aware of it and hopefully a little less hesitant to do that foundational work in the beginning to just hopefully make their lives a lot easier. And the other thing too that's important is it avoids those misunderstandings or disagreements and unnecessary conflict because using a proper contract, everything's out there in the open. Everyone's understanding, what their roles, responsibilities are, what they're delivering, what the usage is allowed, and all that stuff. It's not going to lead to conflict because you're getting it all out of the way to begin with. Much like this partnership, which would have defined like, okay, here's what the partnership looks like. Here's what the equity and shares and whatever else is all about, and here's what happens if you leave, right? So it's interesting. John, welcome. Great to have you here, buddy.
Hey,
Yeah.
how's my audio? Do I need to turn myself up or can you both hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. Yeah, please,
Uh,
yeah, feel free to ask more Reed questions. I'm gonna shut this window
Morvareed,
because I'm baking.
Morvareed, pleasure to meet you. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Morvareed.
You are, yes. Nice to meet you, John.
First and foremost, go Bruins. How's the basketball team doing?
You know what? I haven't been following them this year.
Okay. Do you follow any sports of your alma mater?
Occasionally the football.
Okay. How'd they do last year?
I did not, I didn't follow last year, so it's been
Oh,
a
okay.
couple years since I followed. I think the last time I
I'm
followed was during I think in maybe 2019 or something. I think I got
good.
disappointed at one point because I feel like every time we got to like game five, we went from being good to disappointing.
Uh, I'm not a Bruin, but I hope to maybe be someday
Oh,
in the fine art
nice.
department. Um, Yeah, working on yeah, that. But yeah, a great discussion so far. Thanks to you both. A few different questions. If I don't, but please feel free to cut me off whenever I've monopolized the time. Um, I'm curious, Marguerite. I've been what do you call it? Picked. I've been chosen to shoot the biggest budget project that I've been picked for sometime soon, and I'm needing to create a contract with this client about this shoot. It's an interview, a big interview shoot for a corporate client, um, and I've never in my career had to spell out here's, the budget estimate that I've given you, and I need this amount of money in advance of the shoot, and I need this amount of money after the shoot. Um, and so I'm wondering if there's a tool or like, I mean, I'm sure I can Google this, but I'm just as a professional, I wonder, is there a tool that you use, or, Gary also might be able to chime in, where I can fill out, okay, company A and, contractor John are going to be, working on this project together. Estimated shoot date is this date, and the amount of money he needs in advance is this amount, and what he is delivering are these items at this date. So, like, yeah, I'm kind of, again, it's my first experience creating a contract like this, and I'm looking for help on how to do that.
Yeah, I think it goes back, first of all, I'll just like preface it like everything we're talking about is like educational. So, not legal advice, it's just educational. So
Is
you
that a
would need to
legal stipulation you have to make?
this is I'm not your lawyer, so I can't give you legal advice. You need to talk to your lawyer
Got it.
for legal advice. This is
10,
educational content
10
that we're
4.
talking about. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, and I think it goes back to what Gary and I were talking about, where you really need to talk to an attorney and get a template agreement for your business put together that you can use over and over with your customers. That's really the best solution for what you are, the point you are in your business. You need like a template customer agreement, and then you can even get assistance. Like one thing I do with my clients is if they need help figuring out the business terms, I'll help them with that part too. So, depending on how much assistance you need in terms of just help with legal terms, business terms as well, an attorney would be able to help you kind of flesh that out specific to your business in a format that you can use over and over with different customers that come up.
Do you have just again, since it's a new experience for me, do you have like a ballpark figure for what attorneys charge to create a template like that, or?
It's kind of specific to your business. If you kind of are interested, you're free to like reach out to me privately and we can, have a quick discussion.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I in your discussion, I've followed you on Twitter, if, or X, if we're all agreeing to call it that now, unfortunately. LinkedIn, and I think I found you on Instagram too, based on your profile. So, and I'll email you maybe if, yeah, if, but
Y-
yeah, I thank you for that. Can I ask one more question before I get cut? If I have enough time?
Of course.
Uh, so in your discussions and conversations, I imagine emotion sometimes comes into play, conversing with clients and customers, and um, uh, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know. In discussions and negotiations, I'm wondering like what you found to be best practices um, to deflate or to tamp down big emotions or big feelings when they come up in discussions, if they do for you, or if you've had that experience. Just I wonder if you have best practices for how to navigate a challenging. I don't know if maybe some. I imagine a lot gets done by email and conversation, but I imagine you probably have in-person discussions, and certainly as a lawyer, you're dealing with people in person all the time. But yeah, is that yeah? Looking for ways to be a better conversationalist, discussion negotiator, and any suggestions you might have
Yeah, yeah.
in
So
that
like, yeah,
capacity.
Blake's, or yeah, we got Twitch person that's chiming in, uh, also mentioning like, conflict resolution or managing aspects that could lead to conflict and de-escalate those elements while you're trying to represent yourself and your goals, your agenda, your wants and needs, while also managing the other party and what they're looking for in a way that's not going to, again, come off as disrespectful and lead to conflict. So yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that depends on personalities, right? So I think you kind of have to read the room in the discussion and figure out like how the other side is reacting. Obviously, you want to present things as approaching things as you're trying to find a compromise solution that works for everyone, right? So that's kind of like the goal with these discussions, to approach it as a way of, let's try to find a resolution that works for everyone. Ultimately, you're not in like when you're making a deal, you're not in a dispute. So everyone should be interested in finding that compromise solution that makes everyone happy so they can move forward with the deal, right? And sometimes you'll get someone who's aggressive, and sometimes I've had to negotiate around attorneys on the other side because they're too aggressive, or they're inexperienced, or they don't understand their client's business or interests. So they don't actually understand what their client wants or why their client is engaging with my client. So I've had to assist my client to directly negotiate with the other side's business person to close the deal, and we've been able to close the deal in that way. So there's different approaches. Sometimes I'll help clients. I'll basically like ghostwrite emails for them to send to help kind of move the negotiation forward, or I'll talk to them on a phone call about what they should say if they're handling the negotiation. So I think a lot of it is kind of trying to present things like as this is a fair compromise, and trying to, not get worked up or too personal. And you can always, and sometimes I tell clients they can always like try to blame me, right? Like say like, oh, it's not me, but it's my attorney, right?
Yeah, kind of building on this in terms of like, turning to you as a ghostwriter, and for help, especially trying to like figure out how to communicate effectively in a respectful way, and without like trying to stir up more conflict. I always kind of, in addition to leaning on like, lawyers that I have in my amazing, network, it's also leaning on like, a psychologist, right? Like other, like people that are very well versed and experienced in understanding, like negotiation and conflict and tactics to foster really healthy relationships. So, that's just another wonderful resource to not overlook is you can also, in terms of understanding how to communicate and broach these subjects, psychologists can be really wonderful resources in addition to that.
I also think like there is like a strategy to it, so you kind of know what you can, or at least like when you're talking to your attorney, the attorney will kind of know what are the things that are the most important and what are things you can kind of give on. So you can then it's kind of strategic approach of being like, well, I'll give you this, but this is something I really care about, right? So I'm willing to like, let's come to a solution. So that way it makes people feel like it's not just like I want everything my way, right? It's kind of like I'm giving and getting at the same time. So it has to kind of be that let's work together. I'm going to give on things. So I may be unhappy on some things, but there's some things that I really need. And it's always good to have explanations about why you need that, right? Like you're not just going to be like, I want this, right? But that's again something like your lawyer would be able to like help you be like, okay, well, this is really important and this is why, right? And then helping you like have a reasonable approach so that when you present your position, you look reasonable versus just insisting on something because you're insisting on it.
Yeah, it's really important advice and insight too. And it reminded me when I first got started as a photographer, I initially was working with Getty Images and I was doing a buyout agreement with them where I would shoot like, a show concert for them and they'd pay me up front as a buyout. And I didn't realize what that was because I was like, a young kid. And then I talked to a lawyer and, like family friend, and they explained it. I was like, oh, wait, that's what it means? I'm giving up my entire copyright to them. They now own the copyright to those images that I took. And then they went on to explain how, yeah, because I no longer own the copyright, they can do whatever they want with it. I can no longer monetize it or use it or, include it in my portfolio without their permission. They control it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And so, yeah, like it's just, again, one of these little things to understand how important it is and why in regards to the business case of it, in addition to like any sort of emotional investment you may have over what you create and your IP and all those other things, but just in terms of like the longer term sustainability of your business and creating different kind of like monetization channels, especially as a creator, right? Like if you own the IP and you have the rights to it, you can relicense it multiple times. I had a photographer professor who shot A-list celebrities. He'd shoot for magazines and not get paid a lot for the shoot itself, but he was making $30,000 a month on royalties because of the images going to stock agencies. And then after the temporary exclusive rights for those images expired with the magazine he shot for, like 6 months, a year later, it was then he was then able to relicense those same images to multiple magazines across the globe who wanted to run articles about those A-list celebrities. And because he was doing very unique portraits with them, he was the only one that had those very intimate images to utilize for the articles. But if it was a buyout with that magazine, he wouldn't have any access to that at all. So it's really good that you brought that up as well and kind of like help like remind me of this wonderful kind of experience of just how important it is to understand from the legal aspect of why certain things matter and why you should have certain like terms that protect you in your work. So yeah.
Could I hop in with a question on that, y'all? If again, feel free to remove me from here whenever, Gary.
No
I
way,
don't mean
man.
to
Yeah, you're good. We're
monopolize
we're,
the
we're hanging out.
conversation.
I'm keeping an
How
eye
long were
on
you
other things. You're good. Yeah.
how long
Ask
were you
away.
planning to chat till 4
Yeah, till
or
4. Yeah.
um I don't believe I've ever dealt with copywriting any of the many multi tens of thousands of photos and videos that I've created during my career. Um, Goes to show you how good of a businessman I am. uh, like uh, as again educational instruction from a lawyer, for an archive of maybe close to 500,000 images of photos from the past 20 plus years, is is there any best practice for what I should do to protect my images that I've created? And again, I understand it's an educational instruction, not a device, or however you need to stipulate that.
I mean, I think it's important to understand like what copyright is, right? So copyright is basically when you create something, it automatically kind of attaches, right? So your copyright rights are there. Agreements will definitely affect those rights, right? Like Gary was saying, if you enter into an agreement where you have assigned that right away, then you don't own that. Then the other entity owns that. So that will affect where the ownership lies. And then if you take, if a business or individual takes the step of registering their copyright, that gives them additional protections, basically, in cases of someone infringing on that intellectual property, including, for example, the ability to bring a lawsuit or to seek kind of guaranteed damages. Otherwise, they're not, you can't bring a lawsuit unless you actually have registration.
And so how does I mean, again, apologies, I don't need you, I'll do a little bit of research on my end, and maybe Gary can chime in too. But so how does a photographer so do I register copyright on, do like, can I mass register every image and video that I've ever created, or do I have to individually pick, these are my best 100 images that I feel like someday maybe somebody might want to own or buy or use, and I register each one individually with with the copyright office? Or
Well, it's kind of up to you and your kind of goals and what you want to kind of do in terms of actually registering things, right? So that's kind of a business decision on your part. You can research with the Copyright Office about what that process entails and what that would kind of look like and what kind of step you would take. There's a fee associated with it, right? But technically everything the right automatically attaches, right? So it's then the extra step of whether you want to register it.
yeah, I have a close photographer friend who's dealing with this right now, talented sports photographer, and he's got some really great images of Kobe Bryant wearing a Dodgers hat at Dodger Stadium when he threw out, a first pitch or something. And people have stolen that image from him, and are making clothing and stuff, and selling. You can look for it and find it on Walmart's website, like, and he has not licensed or given permission for that image of Kobe that he took back in whenever it was, early 2000s. And so he's having a lot of trouble right now, and is almost at the point of giving up because he feels like he doesn't, I mean, he almost certainly, I would wager, copyrighted that image and registered it as you're describing. And but he's finding, he has consulted with a few lawyers, and but he's just been kind of getting the runaround, and doesn't feel like he has any anything. He's almost given up because there's businesses that are making big money and big celebrities wearing T-shirts with his image on it, and he hasn't seen a penny from all that, and he's kind of at a loss as what to do next about all that.
Well, I think you definitely should, talk to a litigator who works in the intellectual property space who will be able to help analyze that situation and what his options are. And he also, if he's interested in pursuing it, he does need to obviously invest in pursuing it. So I don't know how his discussions with attorneys have been, but they would expect, especially pursuing litigation, there's going to be a significant retainer deposit required and things like that. So
Again, that isn't your specialty per se, Morvareed, that line of work.
I don't do litigation these days. No. So I focus on deal making. But I'm happy, I'm sure I'll put my email in the chat. Your friend is happy. They can email me and I can introduce them to a copyright litigator.
That'd be awesome. Much appreciated. I thank you for that. I'll be in touch. I've got your email already.
Oh, okay. In case.
I assume it's on your website, and I've found your website. So
Yes, it is on my website. That's right. Yeah.
great. Thank you. I think I'll go off. I forget if I had any other questions, but so that I don't continue to monopolize the conversation, I'll say just you can take me off the stage, Gary. And thank you, Morvareed, for your time, and for
Yeah,
you,
no
Gary.
problem. Nice to meet you.
Right on.
Likewise.
Uh,
And last thing, I mentioned in the chat. I don't know if you're eyeballing any of that, Morvareed. You mentioned something about there being groups of people doing activities out in the world. I'd love to hop on that list. If I don't necessarily consider myself in the tech space, but I know my way around tech, and I worked for Apple for a number of years. But well, yeah. Let me know if you guys are doing some fun hikes or something. It'd be cool to meet you.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, send me your email and I'll add you.
Great. Have a good day, and so long for now. I'm gonna keep listening in for the next few minutes if I can.
Right on. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for asking
Yeah.
some great questions. All right, move you
Bye.
down. Sweet. Yeah, kind of building on that real quick. In regards to a content creator um, looking to work with a lawyer to establish those client contracts and other sort of like basic best practices for their business. What would you recommend in regards to them doing the necessary prep work to save time and money when they sit down with a lawyer like yourself to get that work done and finalized? Like, what kind of prep work should they do to create documents or bring specific information to the table for you to act on?
I think it's always helpful the more they kind of have understanding of what their business is like, what how their business is operating and how they are interacting with their customers and timelines and information needed from customers, like how they need to engage with them, if there's different particular offerings they are offering to the customers. So if they can like at least flesh out the business terms, that's a lot easier for the attorney to be able to flesh out the legal issues since the business terms are already fleshed out versus having to kind of help flesh out the business terms as well, right? Or really ask questions to kind of get at those issues that are implicated on the legal side. And I would say uh, you have to be kind of careful, like also with the who you work with, because sometimes I've found that some attorneys don't ask questions. And so they don't actually give you advice and agreements that are structured for your particular business. Because they're like, like I've had a client who, for example, asked for a joint venture agreement. And a lot of attorneys would have been like, okay, I'll draft that. Right. And I told them, let's get on a call first. I want to ask you some questions to really understand your goals so we make sure the agreement is set up for what you're trying to do. And once we got on a call and I asked the hard questions, it wasn't a joint venture at all. It was a beta test. So very different and very different implications for intellectual property. But again, as a non-lawyer, they just had heard the term joint venture and thought that was what it was, right? They didn't actually understand what it was that they were doing. So that's why it's so important to work with someone who really gets to know your business and will ask questions so that they can actually draft agreements and give you advice and counsel specific to your operations and your short and long term goals.
No, I love that you brought that up because, yeah, this when it comes to working with anyone, it's important to vet them. And one of the key ways that I try to uh, like like advise people on how to do that is focusing on their methodology. Try to see if they have a methodology that is focused on establishing the correct context for you and your business and what you are trying to bring them on board to assist with. And there's like so many examples in different roles, different fields where you might see a lawyer or a marketer or programmer or something else or some other field where they've been very successful and they have a lot of accolades. But when you go to hire them and you haven't taken the time to try to assess what their methodology is, if they're really paying attention to context and intent on establishing the correct context, a lot of times they're just trying to copy and paste what they've done with other companies that led to success and just do it for you without any awareness or regard for the context that you're operating in, and all these different factors are so unique and different, right? So it's good that you brought that up. I'm curious, in addition to being aware if they're asking questions and what kind of questions they're asking, what other tips do you have for someone trying to vet if a lawyer is a good fit for them, if a lawyer is worth working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think for any as an initial kind of starting point for small and mid-sized businesses, just as a starting point of view, large law firms are not a good fit. So large law firms, I got trained at a large law firm before I started my practice. They are great learning great area to learn in and do sophisticated work, but they work with Fortune 100 companies. That is their key clientele. They will put more of their attention. They will prioritize the work for the big companies, and they will also not put young attorneys on matters for these large companies. Instead, they will put young attorneys who don't know what they're doing on small businesses who work with them. So you, as a small business, you end up getting inexperienced attorneys that you're paying a lot for and who are spending more time. So you're getting charged even more because they're spending so much time to get work that is often not the best quality. I've had clients who, worked with a large law firm, and I've seen software agreements and SaaS agreements that didn't have IP provisions in there because these young attorneys didn't know what they were doing, right? So it's just not a good fit. And I've seen another situation where client had a $10 million deal, but this was not a priority for a large firm because they're dealing with hundreds of $1 million deals, right? So they were being put off for weeks at a time by their attorneys, right? Like they needed to close the deal, but their attorneys just didn't, it wasn't a priority for them. So I think as an initial step, make sure you're talking to like a small boutique or a boutique practice, as that's a better fit if you are a small business. So you can build like a personal relationship. And then from there, have a discussion. I think a lot of it is like, do you feel like this person really understands your business, is interested in understanding your business, and is interested in kind of working with you on a long-term basis?
I really appreciate the tips and advice on that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of early stage founders, they do gravitate towards the largest firms because they see the big brand names and the big clients that they work with, and think that's the best option because of that reputation that they have. But it is really helpful to be aware of how that can work against you based on what you've shared. Yeah, I'm trying to think. So we got 7 minutes left. Before we kind of wrap things up, um, since AI is kind of a focus of yours, I'm curious, there's a lot of stuff going on, but has there been any interesting developments in AI that AI startups should be aware of, that, maybe there's some different things coming up on, possible, court cases or something like that? Anything that people should kind of pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we are in a time where seeing state by state action on a lot of this stuff that's creating more requirements for companies operating in this space. So, both from a data privacy aspect, since AI is very data driven, obviously, but also just from a purely use of AI technology aspect. So, we have laws that have gone into effect or that have been passed and are going into effect in the near future, including in, Colorado around profiling using AI and having to, disclose that and give people an opportunity to basically challenge decisions made by AI. We have, in California, we have a law passed that's going into effect next year about transparency around AI and having basically developers and employers of this technology have to build tools on their platforms that allow users to be able to um, run through the content and determine if something is AI generated content or not, having to label AI generated content as AI generated. There's other additional laws that are being considered around now about having to, again, disclose that you're engaging with an AI, particularly when you're dealing with minors. So there's just more, I think, more of a push around transparency and responsibility for use of AI in state laws, since the federal government isn't really, I don't expect much guidance coming from there. So it's going to be state law based.
That's really interesting for sure. So I appreciate, yeah, the heads up on that. Yeah. All right. So 5 minutes to go. Is there anything you'd like to share with the community? Any updates? Any, calls to action, requests? Anything?
Let's see, anything coming up? As I said, there is like educational content that I always put out, including about AI and stuff. So, again, feel free to connect with me on any of the social media, or follow my YouTube channel, where I have a lot of the videos all posted. And then, yeah, if you're interested in getting outdoors and connecting with the community, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll get you on those list. So we have a couple events coming up, so I'll make sure to include you.
Awesome. And yeah, feel free to shoot the details over to me, and I'll put them on any of the meetup groups that you want me to share them with, downtown or west side, or wherever you got an activity happening. Be happy to help promote. You're amazing as always. It's always a real treat and joy to have you be a part of this. And I just also want to give you a little update that the consistency of being able to have these office hours with you and other wonderful mentors has been really, really helpful. We're still kind of in beta with all of this, with the activity, with people kind of participating consistently, but it's doing a wonderful job of raising a lot of awareness and bringing a lot of interest so far into the larger group. And I've had a couple potential industry partners looking to help us with capital and put more resources into the community so far, just because they keep seeing these events pop up. So I just want to really thank you for playing a role in this and helping jumpstart the activity here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having you back if you're willing, and yeah, keep building on the momentum. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Of course, always happy to join. Thanks for having me, Gary. I'm excited to see this platform continue to develop.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, John, I'll shoot you a follow up with Morvareed's YouTube, so you can yeah, follow with her cool content that she's been sharing. And yeah, with that, thank you, John, for participating and asking great questions. Thank Doctor for helping out and modding the Twitch. And yeah, Morvareed again, thank you so much. Catch you next time,
Of
everyone.
course. Bye,
Take care.
everyone.